Picture this. You're living on an island paradise, your people have thrived for centuries, and strangers arrive on the horizon. You greet them with open hands, gifts, and curiosity. But what you don't know is that these explorers are the advance guard for a wave of conquest, land theft, and cultural erasure. This is the real story of Captain James Cook and Hawaii. A story of trust betrayed, imperial ambition, and the fight for survival. In January 1778, Captain James Cook, a British naval officer, became the first European to set foot in Hawaii, landing at Waimea Bay on Kauai. The Hawaiians, renowned navigators and stewards of the land, welcomed Cook and his crew with generosity, offering food, water, and gifts, and believing these newcomers might be gods or messengers, especially since Cook's arrival coincided with the Makahiki festival honoring Lono, the god of peace and harvest. But Cook was not just an explorer, he was a scout for the British Empire. His detailed maps, journals, and reports would later guide traders, missionaries, and, eventually, imperial forces to the islands. Cook was not alone in this role. George Vancouver, who sailed with Cook, returned in the 1790s to negotiate with chiefs and lay the groundwork for British influence, while John Young and Isaac Davis, two British sailors who became advisors to King Kamehameha I, helped him unify the islands, but also introduced Western weapons and tactics that forever changed Hawaiian society. While Hawaiians saw guests, the British saw opportunity. Cook's reports described Hawaii's fertile land, strategic location, and potential for trade, sparking the interest of imperial powers. Soon, other explorers followed in his wake, many acting as spies and informants for their home countries, gathering intelligence that would later be used for conquest and control. In 1794, George Vancouver persuaded King Kamehameha I to cede Hawaii to Britain. Though the British government never formally accepted the offer, the groundwork for foreign influence was laid. American traders like Captain Simon Metcalfe and Captain John Kendrick soon arrived, bringing with them guns, diseases, and a relentless hunger for sandalwood and whale oil. These early contacts didn't just change the economy, they shifted the balance of power among chiefs, introduced deadly epidemics, and paved the way for waves of missionaries, merchants, and, eventually, the U.S. military. What began as encounters between strangers quickly became the opening act of colonization and loss. The consequences were devastating. Cook and those who followed brought diseases, measles, smallpox, tuberculosis, that decimated the Hawaiian population. By the late 1800s, the native population had plummeted from over 300,000 to less than 50,000. Trade with foreigners shifted power among chiefs, as those who controlled access to Western goods gained new authority. This created new class divisions and rivalries, undermining traditional Hawaiian society. Missionaries and businessmen, like Hiram Bingham and Lauren Thurston, acquired vast tracts of land, turning communal Hawaiian land into private plantations for sugar and pineapple. Ordinary Hawaiians were pushed off their land, forced into wage labor, and stripped of their language and culture. But the relationship between Cook and the Hawaiians would not last. After returning to Hawaii in 1779, Cook's crew clashed with locals over resources and the theft of a ship's boat. In a desperate attempt to assert control, Cook tried to kidnap the High Chief Kalaniʻu as leverage. This act of betrayal shattered any remaining trust. On February 14, 1779, at Kealata Bay, a confrontation broke out. Cook was struck on the head and stabbed to death by Hawaiians defending their chief and their dignity. Cook's death was not the end of foreign encroachment, it was the beginning of a new, more aggressive phase of imperial ambition. By 1893, a group of American businessmen and sugar planters, driven by profit and the desire to control Hawaii's land and resources, conspired with support from U.S. Marines to overthrow Queen Liliuokalani, the last monarch of Hawaii. Their goal was not democracy or freedom, it was to protect their economic interests and ensure that Hawaii's wealth flowed into their own pockets. The islands were annexed by the United States in 1898, despite petitions and protests from Native Hawaiians. But Hawaiians did not accept this quietly. Queen Liliuokalani herself wrote, I yield to the superior force of the United States of America, whose minister has caused United States troops to be landed at Honolulu and declared that he would support the provisional government. The Kūʻē Petitions of 1897, signed by over 21,000 Hawaiians, demanded the U.S. Senate reject annexation. At its core, the overthrow of Hawaii was not just a political coup, it was a capitalist takeover. The pursuit of sugar profits, land ownership, and market control by a handful of elites led to the destruction of a nation's sovereignty and the dispossession of its people. This is the legacy of capitalism unchecked. When profit is put above people, justice, and culture, entire societies can be bought, sold, and erased. This pattern wasn't unique to Hawaii. Across the world, so-called explorers often arrived as guests, only to pave the way for conquest. Take Mungo Park, the Scottish explorer who traveled along the Niger River in West Africa in the late 1700s. Like Cook, Park was welcomed by local communities who saw him as a guest and a curiosity. But his detailed maps, journals, and reports would later be used by European powers to justify and plan the colonization and partition of Africa. Park's journeys, like those of Cook, Vancouver, and others, were not just about discovery, they were about gathering intelligence, softening resistance, and opening the door for imperial expansion. From Captain Cook in Hawaii to Mungo Park in West Africa, and countless others, these explorers were often the first wave of empire, setting the stage for soldiers, settlers, and businessmen to follow. The overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom was a textbook case of imperialism and capitalist exploitation, not merely a loss of sovereignty. The land and labor of the Hawaiian people were seized for the profit of a few, while the majority lost their rights, their resources, and their voice. The sugar barons and foreign investors who orchestrated the overthrow were driven by the relentless pursuit of profit, markets, and cheap labor, the same forces that have historically fueled colonialism and resource plunder around the world. This pattern is global. In his landmark book Open Veins of Latin America, Uruguayan writer and revolutionary Eduardo Galeano exposed how centuries of colonialism and capitalism drained the wealth of Latin America to enrich foreign empires and corporations. Galeano wrote, "The division of labor among nations is that some specialize in winning and others in losing. Our part of the world, known today as Latin America, was precocious. It has specialized in losing ever. Despite everything, Hawaiians resisted. From the 1895 Wilcox Rebellion, where royalists and commoners alike took up arms to restore their queen, to the ongoing Hawaiian sovereignty movement, ordinary people have fought, sometimes at great personal risk, to reclaim their land, language, and dignity. They organized petitions, staged protests, and kept their traditions alive even when it was dangerous to do so. Today, Native Hawaiians continue to organize for justice, whether it's fighting for the protection of sacred Mauna Kea against corporate telescopes, demanding the return of stolen land, or reviving the Hawaiian language and culture in schools and communities. Their struggle is not just about the past, but about building a future where their voices are heard, their rights are respected, and their identity is celebrated. The spirit of resistance lives on in every act of cultural revival, every legal battle, and every new generation that refuses to be erased. The story of Captain Cook in Hawaii is not just about the past. It's a warning about what happens when trust is betrayed and profit is put above people and land. But it's also a story of survival, resistance, and the unbreakable spirit of a people who refuse to be erased. Solidarity with the struggles of Native Hawaiians and all peoples resisting imperialism. No to land theft, yes to people's power. Organize. Resist. Be unbreakable.